Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this safety review of 2025 workshop brought to you this evening by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. Of course, the next 75 minutes, we're going to break the workshop down into some easily digestible chunks, and we're going to cover three themes, which have all been the subject of recent AAIB investigations. And through our work with the CAA, these are some safety themes that the CAA think, the GA unit think we would like to cover with you. And we welcome your engagement and your thoughts as we go through this as ever. The three themes are going to cover autopilot and trim runaways, fuel testing and draining, and a bit of loss and control. Be lots of time for Q&A as we go through a game, which we'd love you to take part. We've got the Q&A box and the chat box as well. But I'd like to introduce my fellow presenters. Delighted to have, again, Charlotte and Phil. They're familiar faces to some of you that have done these before. I'll let them introduce themselves next. If you haven't met me before, I'm Matt Lane. I'm a head of training, senior examiner with the CAA, and an active single multi-engined flight instructor. But I'll let Charlotte introduce herself. Over to you, Charlotte. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Dadswell. I've been flying for over 20 years, instructing for 16 now, and I'm a full-time instructor and head of training.
Thanks, Charlotte. And Phil, great to have you with us again, Phil.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Bird. Pleasure to be with you this evening. My career spanned the RAF and civil sector, so flown the Tornado, Hawk, and Typhoon in the Air Force as a frontline pilot and an instructor. I currently fly for Virgin Atlantic. I flew in the Jumbo. I flew for Thomas Cook as well, and I'm a general aviation FI, also some display flying in my spare time. Pleasure to be here this evening. Looking forward to our discussion.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. If you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please sign up to our mailing list, and you can do this by going to our website, www.astralaviationconsulting.com, or use the link that's just appeared in the chat box. Signing up also will give you access to the replay of this workshop, so you don't have to take notes, or if there's bits you want to recover, you can do that, and there's a whole other host of safety resources in there as well. Somebody said actually as well that the chat box is not connected, but we've put that. But I'll let Sophie have a look, who's doing the tech for us in the background again there as well. So Sophie will have a look at that. Zoom has had these problems before, but it doesn't. Hopefully, Sophie will reset that shortly. We're going to start though with a poll. Many of you will have seen the polls. This is just to get you familiar with it, and it just gives us a bit of information about who we've got in the audience this evening. If you're watching us on YouTube, you won't be able to interact with the poll functionality on Zoom, but you will be able to. We'll make sure you get the answers to all of these as we go through on the boxes. So what aircraft do people mainly fly? We know many of you fly lots of different types, but which one do you mainly fly? Just give us an idea there as well. That should be up on the screen there. And if we could have a look at the results, please. Brilliant. So lots of single engine piston. Great to have some of our microlight and glider TMG community, some MEP, and quite a few from the gyrocopter community again with us this evening as well. That's brilliant. Everybody is welcome, and we hope we will cover all perspectives and welcome perspectives from everybody there as well. So first section is about autopilot and trim runaways. And again, I'll just answer the comment before we get into this. Somebody's saying people can see the link, but people can't actually post in it as well. So Sophie will be working on that in the background, but we'll keep pressing on for now as well. So we're going to start this topic with a poll just to get you thinking about this as well. So if we can have this poll on here, please. So a little bit more wordy, these polls tonight, but just hopefully get you thinking a little bit there as well. So in the event of an electric pitch trim runaway, especially at low altitude, what do you think is the most critical action to take? we've got a few options here as well. Immediately pull the master switch circuit breaker, main to control, and disengage yours pilot trim. Immediately select full opposite pitch trim to counteract the runaway, or check the flat position and adjust as necessary. What do people think? Give people just a few seconds to read that. Okay. Let's have a look at results. Let's see what people think on this one there as well. So majority of people have gone for B, maintain and control the aircraft. And that is the answer we were looking for there as well. The master switch, and we'll kind of come on to this and discuss this as well. There's lots of circuit breakers, there's lots of switches for different systems. So what we're going to do is we'll discuss this in a little bit more, but really the answer we're looking for is the second one there, main control and disable the autopilot or electric trim. Like I say, look out for that theme because we're going to discuss it a bit more. Right, so the case studies we're going to discuss today do relate to some accidents and some AAIB reports. Some of them are sadly fatalities, and that if some of you are involved in these accidents, our condolences. But we're not attributing blame. We're not trying to comment on the abilities or the decisions of anybody here. What we're trying to do is use these AAIB reports and use the lessons and recommendations that came from them to have a safety discussion and maybe all take away some things that we can think about for our future flying. So, like I say, if you do know more about the accidents or whatever, please take it in the spirit that it's intended there as well. We're going to look at two AAIB investigations, and these really to highlight how trim and autopilot malfunctions can rapidly become really problematic. And there's two aircraft, two reports there as well. So the first one is Golf Bravo Kilo Juliet Whiskey. And this accident happened in July 2023 near Bagby Airfield. It's an Aztec. The pilot was returning from Ireland after a long multi-sector day, and everything looked routine until the aircraft turned on right base for runway 06. Now, radar and CCTV that they found and used in the report showed a progressively steepening descent. The aircraft suddenly entered a 30 to 40 degree dive from around about 1,000 feet, and they didn't see any attempt at recovery. The aircraft sadly struck trees and terrain almost wings level, and there was a quite severe post-impact fire. Now, what they found during the investigation was that the pitch trim drum, it was found 3 millimeters from the full nose down position. So it's pretty much all the way full nose down. Now, investigators did consider whether this was due to post-impact movement, but they also noted it was more nose down than any expected trim settings for the speeds observed on CCTV. So a trim runaway possibly be related to the inoperative but partially functional autopilot was considered the most likely cause. But it wasn't, they couldn't 100% prove it because of the nature of the wreckage. Now, the autopilot in this aircraft was placarded in op, yet it was still partially powered. The aircraft also lacked a yoke-mounted autopilot disconnect switch, and the relevant circuit breakers were low and out of sight. The pilot hadn't completed differences training on the Aztec as well, which may have been a factor. So in essence, they think at low altitude, a pitch trim excursion left the pilot with insufficient time or leverage to recover. So that's the first kind of case study that comes out. Now, the second one, before we go on to discussing some of the takeaways and the learning points from these, is an American registered aircraft, November 761 Juliet uniform. It happened Leeds East in April 2024. The pilot had flown 2 previous legs that day, and it had some intermittent autopilot trim warnings. But on the final departure, during the takeoff roll at about 70 knots, the pilot attempted rotation, but the control column wouldn't move. He rejected the takeoff, but as the power came off, the aircraft briefly became airborne. With full nose down trim set, the pilot couldn't hold the nose up. The aircraft bounced, the nose gear collapsed, and the aircraft inverted. Sadly, the pilot, the passenger later died from injuries, but the pilot survived. Now, the elevator trim in this case was found fully nose down. The autopilot system, as I said, had got some intermittent faults, and it was capable of driving the trim wheel fully without the pilot noticing. Now, the autopilot engage switch was found in the on position by part of the fire crew. So they believe that the autopilot was actually on. So this accident highlights how an unnoticed trim position or the trim being driven by a faulty autopilot, and this can produce a situation where the aircraft becomes uncontrollable, very low level, very quickly at quite a critical moment. So there's two accident case studies. Like I say, quite topical ones, quite recent ones, all involving kind of trim and autopilot potentially issues. So I'm going to hand over to Phil now to talk about some learning points from there.
Yeah,
Over to you, Phil.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so some learning points from those then. So, yeah, knowing how the system operates, it's obviously really important to understand the manual, electric, and auto trim modes, how they operate, and how they interact. So if that's not something you've gone over recently, it's a good idea to have a look at. Knowing where these circuit breakers actually are and how to get to them instinctively is so important. I've only had one of these for real. That was in the last aircraft I flew. That was a 747, a freighter version of 747. The two trim cutout switches were immediately obvious. Big red covered switches, huge things, easy. In the aircraft that we're talking about, that we fly there, they're not that easy to identify, and it's so important to just know where they are and to be able to get to them quickly. It's also worth just thinking about what the force is going to be like. The manual force when the system fails can be quite a lot, especially in older aircraft, and they happen quickly. They can be overwhelming, and it's definitely create startle. So for me, a big learning point from this, or something to think about, is just how we self-brief, or we brief someone else if we're flying together, and bring in trim runaways into our TEM briefings, and just think with the startle that it's going to cause, especially if we're in a critical phase of flight, low to the ground, how are we going to deal with that? In these incidents, possibly, only possibly, the pilot could have been unaware of where the circuit breaker was for either the autopilot or the electric trim. Obviously, sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart. So thinking about that TEM phase and the pre-takeoff vital actions, including an item in there that has you physically identifying the switch, just going through that cognitive process of getting to the circuit breaker is a really great idea. Not only is it going to help you get there quicker, but it's going to get that cognitive brain function going to make you do it in the event of having a trim runaway. Maybe a good one to reflect on how many of us actually do that. Before takeoff, we should also visually confirm the trim is in the takeoff range. Not many of us would routinely monitor the trim wheel necessarily. A bit of pitch authority feels abnormal. Stop the takeoff if you're taking off nice and early, or if you're in the air, get to that circuit breaker as quickly as possible. Remembering that a trim runaway can happen at any time. So if you feel it, if you feel that force increasing, suspect it is a trim runaway. Fly the aircraft and get to that circuit breaker. Next slide, please. There we go. So the immediate actions for a trim runaway. Altitude, you're going to hold that and expect heavy forces. So we're going to fly the aircraft first. Autopilot, going to get that disconnected. Trim movement, going to stop by pulling the trim circuit breaker, and back to that all-important bit of knowing where it is and getting to it instinctively. Retrim manually, and then back to aviating, flying the aircraft, power, pitch, and stabilize. Both reports show that a disabled or placarded autopilot can still have a partial function. So if it's unserviceable, pull the circuit breaker and make sure it is isolated before flight. I fly the 330 now at Virgin, and that's one of our pre-flight checks, is that any placarded item, if it has a circuit breaker associated with it, that circuit breaker is pulled. So that's a really important one to do. And just of note, the AAIB and the CAA highlighted the need from these incidents for formal differences training to include autopilot and electric trim systems, improved visibility for circuit breakers because they can be so difficult to identify, and reinforced maintenance requirements for older autopilot systems. Charlotte, with that, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, so takeaways from these. Both events sadly were preventable. The underlying issue in each case was trim mismanagement driven by autopilot faults or incomplete checks. Awareness and training are the primary defences here. Autopilots vary enormously in age, reliability, and integration. Many have limited warning systems. If you don't know exactly how yours behaves, you cannot safely use it. Human factors, fatigue, workload, expectation bias, played a role in both these accidents. Trim systems fundamentally change the aircraft feel, and any unexpected force is a warning sign. So 3 golden rules here. Number 1, eyes on trim, visual and tactile confirmation. Number 2, disconnect first, diagnose later, if anything feels wrong. And 3, know your breakers, trim and autopilot, and be able to reach them instantly. Have them marked in different colour or collared can help you get there quickly. In addition to the CAA guidance already available online, the CAA is looking at promoting further safety material on this topic during 2026, which will be promulgated via Skywise. Okay, let's move on to our second theme, which is fuel.
Thanks, both. I'll just pick up a few queries and questions from this as well. A few people have commented on having red rings or red or even different coloured collars around the CBs and that. And that is very much what they're recommending from the AAIB report and that as well. Charlotte, I don't know whether your Cessnas at your school, do you have your collared identified on there for the trim and autopilots?
It's quite handy. It's in the corner, so it's bottom right, so it's easy to get to quickly, which helps. So positioning is another factor. If it's in the middle of a bunch of them, it's going to be a bit harder to find potentially. So yeah, highlighting then is going to be even more important.
Yeah, so having some coloured collars around them, I think Nigel mentioned on that as well. Being able to identify them quickly, really, really important. I mean, you may want, if you can't fit a collar for some reason, you may want to, I don't know if there's paint or something like that, but you know, to identify it, talk to your maintenance organisation about that as well. Interesting comments from some people about flying aircraft with only electric trim. They haven't got a manual trim reversion, which has got to be quite unusual. Quite a few people flying the Diamonds as well. Those of you that experience on the Diamonds will know that the autopilot and the trim is all kind of interlinked. There isn't a separate trim on switch on a lot of the Diamonds. There isn't a separate CB for it. It's all part of the autopilot CB. So knowing the system and having those differences training, you know, is really quite important there as well. So I'm just going to pick up one question there from Clive. No one's mentioning slowing down. Trim remain a fast aircraft causes high forces slow down and the forces reduce. Any thoughts on that one, Phil? Certainly from some of your other more faster pointy days.
I was just WhatsApping you to ask you to pick up on that point because I think it's a great point. And it comes down to flying the aircraft, right? Yeah. So those trim forces are going to decrease if you slow down. For those in the group that are flying aircraft capable of higher indicated airspeed and TAS, slowing down is a cracker. It will make the problem go in. In larger aircraft, faster aircraft, that's one of the vital actions to slow down. So and just as applicable in this arena. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and somebody else commented as well, electric trim only in several microlight types, which is interesting. You know, how you deal with that threat and management of a trim runaway and recovering from that is definitely something I'd be interested in discussing there as well. Somebody's also commented, could a problem be mitigated by not engaging the autopilot and told establish at cruise altitude? Well, yes, and one of the things I often ask when I'm doing tests is, what is, when can the autopilot be engaged? And quite often you find people don't actually know because there will be guidance in the flight manual as to the lowest altitude that the autopilot can be engaged. Those of you that fly twins and that, some of the twins, DA42 for example, it says autopilot is not permitted, one engine inoperative. Which again, sometimes people don't know that you can't use the autopilot when you're asymmetric. But again, read into your particular type and your flight manual on that. Final question and pick up before we do move on. Somebody says, is having a breaker for electric trim a mandatory requirement as the aircraft I fly mainly has electric trim but no isolation? I would say that some means of isolating the electric trim, whether it be a switch or a circuit breaker, would be a mandatory requirement. Certified and certified aircraft. Charlotte, I don't know whether you've ever come across in more LAA permit types that you've dealt with. I would think the LAA would also require it. I don't know.
Not sure. Yeah, not personally flown any others with that. So good question.
It's a good question. We will look into that one and take that away. Somebody said, Godfrey, thank you for LAA types. It's compulsory there as well. So yeah, but yeah. Somebody's also about the accidents and the reports as well. We will get the links to you, even if we don't get a chance to drop them in the chat tonight. There'll be the links to these accident reports are all part of the email, the post-event email that you'll get with the links in there as well. So you'll be able to see those. But if you just Google the registrations that you see, they'll be come up there as well. Right, so quite a few questions there, but there's some really good questions that I didn't want to miss. So that's why I picked them up there. But let's look at fuel in the next section. Get you engaged again. So let's have another poll. I'm glad the chat's back working as well. Sophie, I don't know, kicked the computer or did lots of things in the background. So thank you for getting that working again, Sophie. Here we go, poll 3. You arrive at the aircraft, it's been parked outside, you drain the left wing, the sample tube's completely full of a clear liquid, smells fatally of avgas. What's the best course of action? So you've drained your tank, got a load of liquid out, have a good sniff of it, smells of avgas. What? So accept the sample, drain another some, continue draining, start the engine, check for normal running. What do people think? So hopefully people have had a chance to have a read through there as well. Let's have a look at the answers for this one then, please. So what are most people gone for? Yeah, 95% continue draining the sum until you're certain no water remains using visual comparison and settling time. Brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly the answer that we were looking for. And we're going to discuss with another case study why. Right, so this next accident report, it's based on a special bulletin, so the full accident report hasn't been out. A few of us, myself and Charlotte, have been down to the AAIB and discussed this with the investigators and seen some of the some of the actual factors involved and some of the things involved. It's November 4698 whiskey. It's a Rockwell Commander, so a pretty punchy, pretty powerful aircraft. It suffered loss of power, though, on climb out due to severe water contamination in the fuel. So what happened? The aircraft departed Fife on the 24th of December, 2024, and the CCTV showed the pilot arriving, conducting pre-flight checks, and then taxiing out. Now, he had the engine running as well for about 20 minutes, suggesting a warm-up or an extended check. Takeoff began just after 11:30, but less than 1 minute into the initial climb, CCTV footage shows the aircraft abruptly departing controlled flight and effectively an incipient spin. At the same time, interestingly, CCTV in a nearby village recorded the engine misfiring. The pilot got out a brief mayday call, but the aircraft sadly struck rising ground near Kinglassie, and the pilot did not survive. Now, at impact, as shown here, the landing gear retracted, the propeller was wind mirroring, and there was no fire. So what they quite quickly able to define was it was a fairly sudden loss of power rather than some kind of incipient mechanical failure. But the investigators found significant water contamination throughout the fuel system. And now in the carburetor alone, the water was present, enough water was present to cover the main jet inlet, and the engine was effectively ingesting water rather than fuel. So it was quite a significant power loss. Now, importantly, the AIB found, and this is where the investigation is going to go, but even a full sample tube of water could still smell of avgas, and Charlotte's going to touch on this more. So this is a really very much a key learning point, and then Phil will give us some takeaways. So over to you, Charlotte, to give us some learning points on this one, please.
Okay, firstly, this was not mechanical failure. The ignition system and the engine components checked out correctly. The root cause was this water contamination, which entered the fuel system sometime before the flight. The Commander 112 has a multiple sump drains, 2 per wing tank plus the gascolator. And the POH requires draining all 5 points and repeating these drains until no water is present. If water is found downstream, such as in the gascolator, the wing and wheel well drains must be redrained repeatedly. In this accident, enough water was present that even after one drain, subsequent samples might still contain water. The AAIB notes that pilots sometimes rely only on smell, but as we've seen here, a tube of pure water can retain a noticeable avgas odour if the tube was previously used for fuel. Fuel samples must be assessed primarily by sight, not smell, as water will always separate and sink to the bottom. In addition to using a fuel sample tube to check for water in the fuel, you can also check the fuel by pouring a small amount onto dry pavement. If you find water in your sample, it will bead up in droplets because of the surface tension. If bubbles form, you can step on them. Air bubbles will pop, but water drops will remain. So if the sample is all water, it forms a distinct puddle, whereas avgas will continue to spread. So different ways of seeing the difference there. When you're checking a fuel sample at night, a bit more of a challenge, you need to hold the sample against a white backdrop if possible, such as a fuselage, and shine a light on it from the side. The white backdrop will make it easier to detect the colour of the fuel, and light shining from the side illuminates nicely any debris and contaminants more readily. In this case, the aircraft had been outdoors for 7 weeks with only the cockpit covered. Fuel caps had recently had seals replaced, indicating previous water ingress concerns. This should have been an indicator to increase the need for repeated fuel sampling, particularly prior to the first flight in a while. Also note that the handling after the engine failure contributed to the accident outcome. The aircraft entered a stall or a spin after power loss, reinforcing the importance of flying the aircraft above all else in an engine failure after takeoff situation. Immediately pitch the glide speed and then assess what options are available. So looking at the next slide, looking at these different fuel samples on the screen, first one is 100% avgas, second one 100% water, and then 50-50. The water is colourless, note it sinks to the bottom, sitting below the avgas in the right-hand sample. So you want to see a nice clear join. Careful not to shake the sample and mix them, let it settle out, and then you can see clearly if there's any water present.
Thanks, Charlotte. And well, we'll do the takeaways. I'm not going to eat Phil's sandwiches there, but just have a look at those pictures and that as well. So, there's if you're in a rush, you're in a hurry, some of those pictures could look quite similar, couldn't they? But let's talk about these takeaways, Phil. Then.
Yeah. So thanks, Matt. So yeah, this incident, I mean, it underscores a real critical message, right? That the water ingress is one of the main threats to piston aviation. It's not that long ago I walked out to, well, it was last year, I walked out to PA28, which had both of its fuel filler caps off. They've been off all night. That was a really easy one to spot. But water ingress can happen, as Charlotte was alluding to, much more insidious ways, meaning that even well-maintained aircraft flown by experienced pilots can be brought down by water that goes undetected pre-flight. So it's that pre-flight stage that's going to really save us. So 3 key takeaways. So drain all fuel sumps visually, repeatedly and thoroughly. If water is found in any location, you've got to keep draining until that is entirely clear. Secondly, do not rely on smell. A full tube of water can still smell of fuel, especially in the flying clubs with the tubes used all the time. Those tubes would still smell of fuel to be in the washing machine 20 times. So you can't rely on you just can't rely on the smell. And thirdly, remember that we need to take fuel samples prior to refueling the aircraft, since the act of refueling is going to mix that water and fuel, meaning that the samples will not necessarily show water. It takes approximately 20 minutes for the water to sink through the fuel to the bottom of the tank, which is the area where you're going to drain it and detect it. So water, the sample has to be taken prior to refueling. Another important point is never to change fuel tanks prior to takeoff. Takeoff should occur on the same tank that you've just conducted the power checks on. Obviously, read your own aircraft's manual, the PIH. Some aircrafts specifically state that fuel flow from each tank must be selected on the ground prior to departure to check for sound fuel flow. But the big takeaway there is never switch them over to a tank that hasn't been used for checking on the ground. And ultimately, as Charlotte spoke to at the end of her piece, then be prepared for an AFATO. This forms part of our TEM, part of our thought processes to startle and to TEM briefing, and be prepared for that engine failure after takeoff, and be prepared with the correct actions, which are going to be to close the throttle and get the mixture to instinctive cutoff. That keeps things simple. It stops the engine firing back up into life after you've planned your perfect force landing after takeoff. But just be ready. These events are rare, thankfully, but they are deadly, and we avoid them by the meticulous fuel checks, no matter what, on the ground before takeoff. Matt, back to you.
Thanks, Phil. That's great. And a few people have commented, how did the aircraft actually get airborne and that if there was water in it? I've dealt with a couple of cases actually in some of my own flying schools where, the fuel draw during the taxi and even during a short power check is fairly minimal. But as soon as you get that full demand, that full power demand on the climb out, it can be just a kind of horrible, 400 or 500 foot point of view when there's been quite a draw of fuel, but that's when it suddenly goes. Somebody's asked as well, what kind of percentage of water will cause engine failure and what percentage would lead to rough running partial power? I don't know what you think, Phil. I don't think there's a definite answer to that, really. I think it will be very type dependent as well, I would think, really. I don't think there's yeah.
I think we're ready, and it's type dependent, engine dependent. I think the key is to do the pre-flight checks properly and make sure there's no water present.
Yeah, and as somebody's commented, if a substantial amount of fuel is found in the substantial amount of water is found in the fuel, shouldn't the aircraft be declared as unserviceable? Yes, because there's obviously something really gone on with that aircraft, and it really needs checking out by a maintenance organisation if you're finding significant amounts of contamination. And fuel icing can be an issue there as well. Somebody said, at what points recommended we change tanks for the first time? Charlotte, when do you teach to change tank? What's your kind of tank changing regime? What do you teach at your school?
On the Cessnas, we select both unless they get uneven, so that makes life easy. But I suppose it depends what you're doing. But yeah, it's just changing it regularly, trying to keep it balanced up. And but yeah, not at low level.
Yeah, so fuel pump on, change tank, fuel pump off, check if you've got a gauge that fuel pressure is remaining. So I think that's the teaching point there as well. A lot of people just whack and change tanks and that. You should really put the electric fuel pump on, change tank, fuel pump off, and then do a check that the fuel pressure is still remaining. And if it isn't, you need to put fuel pump back on and maybe change back to the tank that you were feeding there as well. But certainly at low level or on descent, rejoining the circuit, I wouldn't look to change tanks. I would do it at a suitable time as part of your checks. Quite a few questions coming in about MOGAS. We haven't really got the scope to cover MOGAS. There is, I think, Charlotte, there's some really good advice on the BMAA and LAA websites about MOGAS, some tech information about MOGAS, I believe, and that's probably a good source to go to, Charlotte. I mean, do you use MOGAS in some of your permit types that you fly in?
No, I don't personally. A lot of people do, but yeah, something that we're looking differences. Obviously, we've been talking mainly about avgas here, so yes, if you're going to use MOGAS, check out all the details.
Yeah, but LAA or BMAA websites, we'll try and find the links to some of those tech leaflets with those advice to put in the post of an email. Vapor locking in MOGAS can be a significant issue in summer months, as I'm sure many of you will be aware. So, going to move on to loss of control. Let's have another poll just to get you engaged as well. Right. Could I have this poll in, please? So in the event of a stall warning during a go-round, what's the most appropriate pilot response? I'll let people read these. I'm not going to for this one. There's no tricks here, and remember, with any of the polls, we don't record who says what. We have no idea who says what. There's no feedback, no jeopardy here as well. Hopefully, most people will get this right. Go on then. Let's have a look at the answers, please, Sophie. Yes, 95% reduce the pitch angle to decrease it. Yes, angle of attack. Yeah. So yeah, most people get the idea. I think they've all been attending some of our control workshops, but just hold this thought when we talk about the next case study there as well. Yeah, somebody's commented it's tricky for a rotary pilot. I'm sure some of my gyrocopter colleagues on there as well will also have slightly different things. So loss of control, there's two case studies here. Again, some of you may know some more about these, but let's have a look. The first one is a Cirrus. It's Golf Romeo Golf Sierra Kilo. If you want to Google or look at the link, it's a Cirrus. The pilot had 115 hours total time, 16 on the aircraft type, and he was flying some circuits practice. His first two touch and goes quite normal, but on the third, the aircraft bounced on touchdown. Now the data shows, and they've got data from various sources, various engine management and other sources around, and they had some CCTV, as you can see. Power was briefly reduced, but then full power was applied. Full flap was still selected. The nose pitched up further. It then rolled and yawed left, continued to turn until the bank exceeded 90 degrees. The wing entered a fully stalled condition for the final 5 seconds of flight, and the aircraft struck the ground, sadly, approximately 40 meters from the runway. Now, also the CAPS, the Cirrus parachute system, did deploy, but that was due to the breakup sequence because the activation cable was damaged. So, yep, go around and full power loss of control. So quite sad. Very close to the runway. The second accident is a Sports Star, and it's Golf Charlie Mike Golf Bravo, if you want to Google that. It departed Cole Aston in what were actually marginal weather conditions. Lots around this, around weather forecasting, getting information, and that's whether the pilot knew he was departing into marginal conditions, we don't know. But CCTV at departure showed visibility as low as 400 to 600 meters with low cloud around. After takeoff, the pilot flew multiple orbits, changed altitude repeatedly, and then tracked south towards Chesterfield. Now, some ADS-B recorded data shows the aircraft climbing and descending in IMC-like conditions, with effectively the aircraft entering cloud mainly. Witnesses saw the aircraft entering into cloud, re-emerging low, and then climbing steeply back. So this poor pilot was obviously desperately trying to get into VMC conditions. But over Chesterfield, the aircraft entered a series of descending spirals. Some of the rates of descent were over 5,000 feet a minute. And then finally, it was over 11,000 feet a minute descent in a steep right rotation. And tragically, it impacted an industrial estate. So another loss of control, but quite different to the first accident. So let's see what points we can get out of these. So moving on, over to you, Phil. What points? Two quite different accidents here, but yeah, what points can we take out? Maybe some common points.
Yeah, no, indeed, very different accidents. So I mean, the first one, it's low speed, high angle of attack, and that rapid application of power. I fly the Cirrus from time to time, and it does have strong left turning tendencies when power is applied. At low speed, obviously with the flaps out, high pitch, these forces are amplified, and a significant amount of right rudder is required when you're increasing power. The Cirrus training manual emphasises smooth application of power of 4 to 5 seconds, immediate right rudder to counter yaw, and pitch just above the horizon to stabilise, then clean up to 50% flap. In this incident itself, power was just applied too rapidly with insufficient rudder, and the pitch attitude stayed too high with a stall warning on throughout. And it's important even in these serious, very advanced aircraft. I think it's important just to emphasise just the absolute basics of looking at the front, balancing any yaw with rudder, and selecting the appropriate nose attitude, and you will be you will be okay. In this incident as well, the pilot recency was an issue, so hadn't flown for 54 days. Clearly, this incident is going to induce startle and potentially over rotation. So being really defensive and about our recency, I think, is important. Complacency as well, or skill fade. So we see this a lot in the airline industry. Cirrus puts in a yaw down for above 200 feet, meaning that during normal flight, you don't really need to use the rudder. If you have an aircraft like this, or you fly an aircraft like this, what we often talk about in the Airbus world, which is full of this stuff, is to try and stay engaged with the airplane. So while in a Cirrus, you don't need to apply the rudder once the yaw damper is in. Make sure you stay engaged with it and know what the airplane is doing so that you don't lose that motor skill yourself. So power applied too rapidly, pitch attitude too high, and no standard stall recovery applied. Moving to the sports star then, so he's an experienced pilot, but with limited or no IMC experience. So his MPPL syllabus didn't require him to do instrument flying, and he was therefore vulnerable to the loss of spatial awareness in cloud. In the forecast that day, risk of showers, embedded cloud, low cloud bases, and actual conditions at Cole Aston showed a low cloud base around 200 feet. Once visual reference was lost, the aircraft's pitch and bank inputs became unstable, consistent with that lack of SA. Ground speed increased to 178 knots at one stage, suggesting or confirming spatial disorientation. Loss of control is primarily attributed to IMC entry and disorientation. And obviously, if you're not trained in instrument flying, once that disorientation happens, it's very unlikely it's going to get better. I've lost friends in these scenarios. I think it's really important to remember that even if we are trained in instrument flying, we've got that qualification. It's a perishable skill. If we have hopefully a lovely summer in 2026, lots of VMC flying, I think it's worthy of consideration about a currency flight or some kind of training before going back into full IMC trait flying, depending on how competent and how much experience you've got in doing so. And there's a question that we will never know the answer to, but as a team, we've kind of thought about this. Was there somewhere this pilot had to get to? Was there some pressure on him needing to be somewhere? And the saying that it's better to arrive early than never to arrive late rather than never to arrive. If the flight is no longer looking sensible, no longer looking like a safe proposition, then either cancel it or get the car. But with that, over to Charlotte.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so takeaways from these. Both accidents highlight the importance of maintaining control and flying the aircraft. The Cirrus accident demonstrates how quickly a go-around can deteriorate when pitch, yaw, and power are not managed together. A full flap go-around requires precise control, applying the power smoothly, especially if you've got a lot of it, as in this case, and control pitch to prevent excessive angles of attack, using appropriate rudder, in this case a right rudder, to prevent yaw as the power is applied. Avoid over-rotation, keeping that nose just above the horizon until accelerating. Use the trim to help you. Recognise the approaching stall, nose high pitch attitude, decreasing airspeed, aerodynamic buffet, and stall warner if you have one. Maintaining recency, skill fade, as we said, affects decision making and motor response. On the next slide, the Sportster accident reinforces several key safety principles. There we go. VFR minima are limits, not targets. Safe flight requires much better conditions. If the visibility is less than 5 kilometers or the cloud base less than 1,500 feet, pilots should really treat the conditions as potentially unsafe for VFR. In IMC, we cannot rely on vestibular cues. IMC entry rapidly becomes deadly to pilots not qualified to fly on instruments. So an immediate 180-degree turn is the recommended escape maneuver. If in doubt, do not launch. Delaying the departure would probably have prevented this accident. VFR flight into IMC remains one of the most lethal accident categories, so strict personal minima and weather discipline are critical.
Thanks, Charlotte. I'm just going to put in the chat box as well, just and read it as well. A lot of people often miss the fact. So if you look at the single engine piston, the class rating test, it's an SRG 1157 if you want to do it. One of the stalls in the test schedule, if you're doing a proficiency check, or maybe you're getting a class rating having not flown a single engine piston, whatever it is, approach stall, climbing turn with takeoff flap and climb power. And what that's talking about is a mishandled go around there. It's not one of the 3 stalls on the PPL skills test or the LAPL skills test, but it's on there on the class rating test. Well recommend it. If do it. Yeah, as Nick's commented, it can be selected by examiners because it's part of the class rating on the SRG 2128. But very few examiners actually do it. Quite frankly, you will find the majority of skills tests for PPL cover the 3 standard stalls, but it can be an elective one there as well. It's not mandatory. But have a look at that as well. And Charlotte, do you cover this in this mishandled go around in your training at your school? Is it something you cover with your students? Make sure to cover.
Yeah, stuff like that's a useful thing, especially at the revision stage, heading towards a skills test. Some of those other scenarios really useful to be thinking about.
Yeah, and we really encourage people, as we talked about in some of our previous webinars, to try and bring in scenario-based stall spin awareness training. So rather than doing it as an academic exercise, just training for skills test, very much try and link it to the scenarios that students and pilots will see in their normal everyday flying. Right. So those are the 3 themes that we've covered there. What we've got now is just 5 questions, just to round up by a quiz, really, just to wrap up a few things and some other themes from accident reports and our discussions with the CA. Like I say, we don't take any answers of what people said, just have a look at these. So we can have this first one up, please, Sophie. So it's during approach, 2 qualified pilots. Which action best reduces the risk loss of control? So do you allow most experienced pilots flying? You've got 2 pilots. This might be, a couple of friends. Verbal transfer, delay take control, assume the handling pilot will relinquish control if uncomfortable. So again, I know people will you can pick holes in these questions and that it's deliberately written this slightly just to think, oh, what's going on here? What nuances are in here? So what do people think about? What's the answer? Let's have a look at the answers, please. Yeah, 89%. Clear verbal transfer control. The handling pilot is familiar with the seat and control layout. So that's what we're after here. Clear command authority, explicit you have control, I have control calls, and seat-specific familiarity are critical, especially close to the ground. And if people think, where on earth have you got this from? There's a GROB 109 TMG accident report came out fairly recently, where there was confusion about who was piloting command, who was flying, and also the person that actually was performing the landing was unfamiliar with some of the controls and in the seat that they were sat with as well. So it does happen out there. It can be a trap that we can fall into. Phil, have you ever had any handover, takeover of control dramas in your career?
Yeah, a couple like in very high workload situations. Usually, I think probably mine on the Hawk, instructor on the Hawk, when there's been moments when neither person has been flying the aircraft, and or thought the other person was, and in the debrief when you looked into exactly what it was the those first few words there, ensuring clear and verbal transfer of control, and not just assuming that the other person is flying it. Thankfully, not too many, but yeah, some that spring to mind.
Yeah, no, I had one in a glider, an instructor in the back. She said to me, she said, we were sort of wafting around over Bicester, and she said, "What are you doing, Matt?" And I said, "I'm not doing anything. You're flying it, aren't you?" And she thought I was flying it, and I thought, yeah, we'd exactly that. We'd just not had a clear. Luckily, the aircraft was kind of gently turning and firming, but yeah, it could have lowered to the ground. Could have been very serious. Right, question 2 of 5. So for this one, please. And some people are commenting about, yeah, if you can't see the other person, if it's tandem seating, gliders, or other aircraft, and the verbal handover is very, very important. So, which statement best reflects the pilot in command's responsibility when allowing another pilot to fly the aircraft? I'll let you read the answers. You can see where we're going with this. Again, this relates to the GROB 109B accident report if you want a case study on this as well. Hopefully people have had a... So which statement best reflects pilot command's responsibility and another pilot to fly the aircraft? Okay, let's have a look at the answers on this one, please. Yeah, 92%. But pilot in commands, yeah, pilot in command remains responsible. So even if somebody else is flying the aircraft, pilot in command retains responsible, must manage risk proactively and including limited who flies during critical phases of the flight there as well. In some of the accident studies that were that are around there, people have let other people fly their aircraft during takeoff and landing, and it's gone a little bit wrong for these reasons. Right, question 3. Can we have this one, please? See what people think about this one. I'll get Charlotte to comment on this one next. Right, can I have this poll up, please? Why can water contamination in a carbureted aircraft cause a sudden loss of engine power after takeoff? So why is it, do we think? Let's have a look at the answers. What people plump for? 85% gone free. Yeah, it's not so much about the induction system on this one. It's about water can enter the carburetor float well and be drawn into the main nozzle there as well. Like I say, you need that fuel air mix to run your engine there as well on this one. So there we go. And I think this is question number 5 in our little quiz at the end. So if we could have this one up, please, Sophie. So when power is applied during a go-around at a low airspeed and a high nose attitude, so a bit like this accident we discussed in the series, what is the likely aerodynamic effect? Now, before you all start getting on to me in the chat, let's assume, say, a typical American Lycoming type engine, i.e. not a Chipmunk, okay? So not a Chipmunk, a typical Lycoming engine, a Cessna 172, a PA-28, one of those kind of aircraft. Yeah, clockwise rotating prop. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. What people come for. Yeah, 90% got it right. So your roll to left. Yeah, good. Yeah, but again, it comes down to knowing your aircraft and knowing what the aerodynamics effect of your aircraft are going to be. What about Charlotte? You've got one very beautiful permit aircraft and one very beautiful soon to come into your purview aircraft. What kind of what do they do in terms of props and things like that and yaw and things? Is it quite noticeable?
Um, Not so much on the chief, not a huge amount of power, but yeah, my students will be very used to hearing me say rudder a lot of the time. So, yeah, it's just getting used to, as I always say, when your right hand goes forwards, take your right foot with it. In a lot of what we're teaching on, and yeah, it's balancing that and expecting it, being ready for it.
And what about the Gemini? Is that contra-rotating or both? Or
No, it's not. I haven't flown it yet, so I'll get to grips with that soon. But yeah, two engines obviously gives you twice as much going on. So
but Charlotte is restoring with partner a beautiful Mars Gemini. They're out speaking out of school, so look out for that on the circuit. It'll be great to see around. So yeah, excellent. Right, let's have a look. We've got a few questions, and we will. Oh no, sorry, there is one more. Actually, I didn't count very well there, did I? I was obviously there's one more. So hopefully you'll get the theme of this from what we discussed earlier. What's the significant risk of using an autopilot that's placarded in op, even if some functions uh, appear to work? So have a look at those answers there. So you've got an autopilot, it's placarded in op. Some of it kind of works a little bit. This is very common. I could count many times in aircraft last year that I did tests or flew with this kind of situation in op autopilot, but bits of it work, and pilot has said to me, well, it sort of works a bit and things like that. So let's have a look. What do people think for the answers on this one? Yeah, majority going the underlying defects, excessive clutch override, or things going on can definitely unmask an unrecoverable pitch trim or other issues there as well. And then that was, remember going back to that NREG at Leeds East that we discussed in the case studies, that was an autopilot with various faults going on there as well. So that is definitely the answer that we were looking for there. Thank you. Right, there's a few more questions, which I'll just pull up with the team before we wrap up. Nigel has commented, sometimes not just what pilot has control, but ensuring the autopilot is properly engaged before assuming. So, yeah, Phil, I mean, autopilot modes and that's quite important actually for handovers of control, isn't it? So,
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, yeah, if you're going to use an autopilot, if you're going to engage it, you've got to know exactly why you're engaging it and make sure that the correct mode, the modes that you're expecting it to engage have been engaged with, or whatever that mechanism is in your aircraft. And during handover of control, if you're handing over control to the other pilot whilst the autopilot's engaged, confirming those modes and making sure that the individual you're handing over to has understood those modes is critically important.
brilliant. And Charlotte, fuel samples from Bowser's. I don't know if that's something you get involved with at your school. How often do you do those? I know certainly the schools I'm involved in, it's a daily sample from Bowser's or tanks.
yeah, they're checked every morning. So that's one of the jobs that the guys have to do before we get started in the morning. So yeah, making sure that what's being dispensed is going to be good fuel.
Yeah, lots of comments again on Avgas. We put a few links in. We'll send them out with the post event email as well. Like I say, the LAA, BMAA, I think BGA as well have good guidance on the use of MOGAS. What I would say is it's not straightforward using MOGAS. Okay, there's lots of nuances. There's lots of issues with ethanol content and what you fill up with at your fuel station. Is definitely can be very variable. You can get very different quantities of additives, different purities from fuel stations. So it's definitely not something to take lightly. You really have to understand what you're doing and with that as well. But like I say, there is some really good guidance on it. But it's, a little bit more too technical for us to go into tonight. Right, we're at the hour point there as well, so we're nicely on time. Thank you for everybody's engagement. Thank you for all coming, especially on this dark and dingy night. Certainly here in West Oxfordshire, it's been really, really wet and miserable. So thank you all for tipping out and joining us there. Those are some of our social links there as well. There's our website, our contact details there as well. Once we finish tonight as well, a survey will pop up and you'll get some surveys as well. Please take the time to fill this out. I emphasize again, we don't take answers. We don't take who said what and report it to the CA or anything like that. But the reason is your feedback is really valuable to us because the feedback that we get shapes the events and the webinars that we do. So, for example, we did a medical one. We've done the weather. We've done GNSS, partial power. Those are all based on feedback of what people said they would like to see. So please do take that feedback there as well. Skywise there on the right as well has been quite a bit of information coming out from the CEA recently. Please do sign up to Skywise so you get the email notifications. It's a really valuable source of information. Hopefully most people have got those as well. So that's all from us. I'd like to thank Sophie in the background for managing the tech. Sorry the chat didn't start straight away, but Sophie pressed lots of buttons, obviously, and got it working again, which is good. Zoom does all sorts of horrible updates that disables things. So I'm glad she managed to resolve that. Phil, Charlotte, thanks so much for joining us as well. I know you're both really busy. I know Phil's been working hard as well, so it's great. To have you with us. Phil, you're probably going off for a sleep now, aren't you? I don't know. So
yeah, no, absolute pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, sleep would be good.
Yeah, brilliant. And Charlotte, thanks again. If you see us around the bazaars, around flying, do come say hello. Do come chat to us. It's always nice to chat to people face to face as well. We love seeing you around, and I hope we get some good weather coming up soon, and that you can all get flying as well. Thanks for everybody's engagement. There's some names popping up that I recognise, which is great to see as well. And then contact email there as well. Do feel free to drop us emails with thoughts or issues on that as well. We get loads of emails that we can feedback or give on, and we do try and respond to them fairly quickly and get back to everybody on there as well. And it's really great to have those as well. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care and good luck all.